Hello fans of MMA, my name's Duncan and this is my first YouTube video ever. So I guess to start it off, I'll explain very quickly why I made this channel and then hop into the content of today's video. So I made this channel to provide predictions on the UFC main cards. So let you know who I think is going to win the fights, provide a little context around why I think they're going to win the fights, and hear your thoughts. I want this to be an interactive fan page. I've been watching the UFC for over 15 years. I love this sport. I think that these athletes are the best athletes on the planet, and I truly think that MMA fans are the best fans on the planet. And so none of my friends really watch MMA. My girlfriend certainly doesn't. And so I often found myself commenting on YouTube videos and Instagram videos or photos, kind of giving my 2 cents, right? Letting people know what I thought was going to happen in the fights and why. And those are always very interactive. Of course, there are some disagreements, as always, and agreements. And so either way, I always found it very entertaining and enjoyed it, but I thought, why don't I just create my own channel where I can go through the 5 fights that are going to take place on the main card. We're going to skip the prelims and the UFC Fight Pass card just for the sake of time. So we'll go over the 5 fights that always happen on the main card. Again, let you know who I think is going to win, and I'll make an accurate prediction as to, what round, I'll call things like that out and why. And again, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So please comment, let me know whether we agree or disagree. Let me know what you think is going to happen and why. So let's hop right into it. We've got UFC 231 coming up on December 8th. So today is Monday, December 3rd while I'm filming this. And so as I'm going over what the odds are, like the betting odds in Vegas, just keep in mind that this was filmed on Monday, December 3rd. All right, so the first fight of the night, out of the light heavyweight division, number 7, Jimi Poster Boy Manuwa versus number 15, Thiago Santos. Jimi Manuwa, 17-4 of his 17 wins in MMA, 15 of those have come by knockout. So this dude is big, strong, athletic, and really can throw hands. But he's 38 years old, and he started his MMA career 14-0. Super impressive. But since then, he's lost 4 out of his last 7 fights. And 3 of those losses have come by way of knockout. And he's facing a guy in Thiago Santos who is 19-6. And Thiago's really made a name for himself this year. He's 34 years old and he's been in the UFC since 2013. So he's a vet, but he's really made a name for himself this year. And although he has lost in April to David Branch by first-round knockout, he got caught. He's really had a hell of a year. Earlier in the year in 2018, he TKO'd Anthony Lionheart Smith. So super impressive dude. He's on a tear. He's one of those guys that really nobody wants to face right now. He's had a ton of fights. Actually, I think most of them leading up to this point at 185 in the middleweight division. But he's recently moved up to light heavyweight. So it'll be interesting to see how he performs there against somebody the size of Jimi Manuwa. But this dude is just a savage, man. He's on a roll. He's ranked number 15 right now. I think he could be a lot higher than that. I'm pretty sure that has to do with him moving up into the light heavyweight division versus the middleweight division. But both these guys, veterans of the game, both of them built like brick houses, pack enormous power. They share a lot of the same sort of characteristics. But we'll get to the prediction here. So I've got a ton of respect for Jimi Manuwa, but when you're getting knocked out as often as he is, 3 out of his 4 losses, 4 losses out of his last 7 fights, I really think that changes you mentally. And we all know that the mental aspect of fighting is more important than the physical aspect of fighting. And so knowing that he's 38, he's facing a younger, hungry savage in Thiago Santos. Jimi's lost 2 fights in a row. I'm going Thiago Santos, first round knockout. All right, guys, fight number 2 out of the featherweight division. Hakeem Dawodu versus Kyle Crash Bochniak. I'll start by saying that tune in for this fight. It's got fight of the night written all over it. Hakeem is 8-1-1 in his MMA career. He had 8 fights in the World Series of Fighting and 2 fights so far in the UFC. He's 1-1 in the UFC, coming off of a unanimous decision victory against Austin Arnett. So 6 of Hakeem's 8 victories are by knockout. So the dude is super strong, very fast, quick hands, but more of a safer fighter, right? He doesn't necessarily get in there with dirty boxing and bang. He doesn't want to get into, you know, a dog fight. He's a really smart fighter that is super fast and super powerful. He's fighting Kyle Bochniak, who I can't quite say the same about. Kyle's 8-3 in his MMA career, and he's coming off of a loss against Zabit Magomedsharipov. If you guys haven't seen that fight, please go check it out. One of the best fights of 2018. So although he lost that fight, he earned so much respect from myself and the MMA community at large after that performance. I can't really say at any point in time he was going to win that fight, but he knew Zabit, and we all know Zabit's probably a future UFC champion. He knew that going into that fight and did not care. He took it to him as hard as he could the whole fight and was just super impressive. At one point in the fight, he dropped his hands, stuck his jaw out, and let Zabit tag him a few times, and it didn't even faze him. As a matter of fact, it probably gave him more energy. So, you know, they say that it's not the dog in the fight, it's the fight in the dog. There's a lot of fight in Kyle Bochniak, so I cannot wait for this fight against Hakeem Dawodu. Something interesting to pay attention to, though. I mentioned Hakeem's 1-1 in the UFC. His first fight didn't last but 48 seconds or something like that. He lost to a guillotine choke. So he got caught with the right hand. Dude ran forward, wrapped him up in a guillotine, and it was game over. Kyle's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So if Kyle gets this to the ground, Hakeem's going to have a very hard time winning this fight. Something to pay attention to as this fight approaches. That said, I don't think that's going to happen. After seeing Kyle's attitude against Zabit, and now he's facing another striker, a Muay Thai and kickboxer in Hakeem, I think he's one of those guys that looks at a challenge and says, bring it on. So I think these guys stand and bang for 3 rounds. What's interesting is Hakeem is a favorite in this fight. He's -185, but I'm going to make a prediction here. I've got Kyle Bochniak winning via split decision. They stand and bang for 3 rounds, but for the sheer volume Kyle throws at, I've got him scoring more points. Gonna take some damage in the fight for sure, but I've got him winning a split decision. Really interesting fight. Can't wait. Okay, guys, 3rd fight of the night out of the welterweight division. Number 13, Alex Cowboy Oliveira versus number 14, Gunnar Gunny Nelson. Gunnar's back. It's been so long, 17 months since Gunnar's been in the octagon, since July of 2017, last summer. I almost forgot about the guy, but happy to see him back. Happy to see him. We'll see what he does here on Saturday night. He's got a big task in front of him, though. Alex Cowboy Oliveira. The dude's 19-5-1 in his MMA career, and he's a real fighter. This guy, he takes it to his opponents. He really likes to get in a dogfight. Really exciting fighter to watch. He's a striker, Muay Thai expert. Out of his 19 wins, 12 have come by knockout. I think he's got 4 submissions to go along with that. Whereas Gunnar, 16-3-1 in his his MMA career, is a true submission artist. So we've got striker, submission artists. one of those stylistic matchups where it kind of seems like whoever's able to execute their game plan is going to win this fight. If it stays standing, Alex is going to win this fight. If it goes to the ground, good luck to Alex. I think Gunnar's going to take it. So one thing to pay attention to here is, as I mentioned, Gunnar's long layoff. Gunnar started his MMA career with 13 wins in a row. He was undefeated, 13-0, but 13-0-1, I think it was. He had that draw. But since then, he's 3-3. So he's 500 in his last 6 fights. The fight last July in 2017, he got KO'd hard by Santiago Ponzinibbio, who, I'm sure as you guys know, is skyrocketing towards the top of the division and will likely, he should, I think, challenge for the welterweight belt soon. So again, 2 totally different styles, striking, submissions. Who's going to execute their game plan? I'm going with Cowboy Oliveira. He's actually an underdog in this fight, a slight underdog. Gunnar's at -140, but I'm going with Cowboy Oliveira. I think that with Gunnar going 500 in his last 6 fights, taking this long layoff, I'm not a fan of fighters taking these long layoffs and getting back in the cage and fighting someone as aggressive as Alex Oliveira. So I'm going with Alex, and let's go 3rd round TKO. All right, guys, now I'm really getting excited. 4th fight of the night, co-main event. Valentina Bullet Shevchenko versus Joanna Jedrzejczyk. I absolutely love both of these girls. I think they're so talented in their respective martial arts. They're both Muay Thai fighters, both kickboxers. Joanna, 15-2. She's coming off of a unanimous decision victory over Tisha Torres, but as we know, lost her previous 2 fights against Rose Namajunas. First one ended in knockout, and the second one was a very close fight, which I thought she won, but that's up for debate. She was the queen of the strawweight division. Love her fighting style, love her attitude, but she's moving up a weight class, and she's facing a chick in Bullet Shevchenko who is an animal. Absolutely love this girl. Bullet is 15-3 in her MMA career, and she's only lost twice in the UFC. Both those losses were to Amanda Nunes, who is fighting Chris Cyborg on December 29th, and if she beats Chris, is probably without a doubt the best female fighter of all time. The first time against Amanda Nunes, it was a unanimous decision. Second time, split decision. So and that was at 135. Valentina's coming down a weight class to 125, which is her more natural weight. Joanna's coming up to meet in the middle. So Valentina's been facing her whole UFC career bigger, stronger girls than Joanna. So I think the clear advantage there goes to Valentina, just based off of strength and size. An interesting aspect of this fight, though, is that these two have a history together. They both came off of the Muay Thai scene where they fought each other 3 times. Valentina won all 3 of those fights. So I think just from a physical, technical fighting standpoint, Valentina's got the advantage. But the mental aspect as well, right? Like, Joanna lost to this chick in Muay Thai, which I know is a different sport, but she lost in combat sports to Valentina 3 times. I mean, what does that do to your psyche? So it'll be interesting to see how Joanna approaches this fight. Is she as confident as she always was in the strawweight division? I mean, we know she always walked into those strawweight fights thinking she's going to win. But she's moving up a weight class to face Valentina, who is an animal and a bigger fighter. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. So I think this is going to be an absolutely amazing fight. I can't wait for it, but I think it might be one-sided. As it sits today on December 3rd, Valentina is a minus 335 favorite. So over 3-1 favorite over Joanna. I don't see how Joanna gets it done on the feet, on the ground. I just don't see how she's going to win this fight against Valentina. So I'll give her the benefit of the doubt, though. She's a really tough chick, so I don't think Valentina's going to finish her. I think she might beat her up pretty good, but I don't think she's going to finish her. I'm going unanimous decision, Valentina Shevchenko over Joanna Jedrzejczyk. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the main event of the evening. Championship fight out of the featherweight division. Max Blessed Holloway versus Brian T-City Ortega. I cannot wait for this fight, man. Been looking forward to it for a long time. Obviously, it was previously scheduled. Max had to pull out of that fight for health reasons, and I'll touch on that in a second. But been looking forward to this fight for a long time. Let's start with the champ, though. Max Holloway, 19-3, and in my opinion, I know some of you guys are going to disagree with me on this, and that's okay. But in my opinion, the greatest featherweight in UFC history. Most wins in the featherweight division, most finishes in the featherweight division, longest win streak in the featherweight division. So I cannot say enough good things about this guy. His striking is world class. Over the history of the UFC, in any weight division, Max Holloway's striking is some of the best I've ever seen. Punches, knees, kicks, elbows, spinning back fists. I mean, this guy does it all. He's so exciting to watch. And his attitude. It's one of the things that I most admire about Max Holloway is not only is he extremely talented, but his attitude is almost unparalleled. I mentioned before, you know, it's not the dog in the fight, it's the fight in the dog. Well, Max Holloway is a pit bull, but the fight inside of him, the heart that he's got is amazing. I mean, in a good example is in the Ricardo Lamas fight. He was clearly winning that fight. There are 10 seconds to go. He gets a glancing blow by Ricardo, but it pisses him off. And so he looks at him and says, you want to throw down? And for the last 10 seconds, just bang, 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 bang. He didn't need to do, he won that fight. But it just goes to show, you know, if you're in there in the ring with Max Holloway, he is going to take it to you from the first bell to the last. And again, I can't say enough good things about Max Holloway. But he's facing Brian Ortega. And what a guy Brian Ortega is. Of course, a submission master on the ground, a jiu-jitsu expert up on the highest of levels that we've seen in the UFC. He's undefeated, 14-0. He's had 6 fights in the UFC, 3 of which have been by submission, 3 of which were by knockout. So he's finished all of his fights in the UFC with an even split of submission and knockouts. So you can't overlook his hands either. You know, he just faced Frankie Edgar, who had never been stopped before, and he knocked him out. So Brian Ortega is as hot as anyone in the UFC right now, and it's going to be a really, really interesting matchup. I'm excited to see what happens. But I think it's one of those who executes their game plan the best. Now, Max is a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, and we know his striking is world class. Brian Ortega is a world-class black belt in jiu-jitsu, and also has really good striking. But as DC, has famously said, there are levels to this game. And Max Holloway's striking is on a different level than Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega's ground game is on a different level than Max Holloway. So, although I think Brian will stand with Max, of course, and I don't think Max is afraid to go to the ground with Brian, although maybe he should be. It's really going to be who executes their game plan. I think Max wants to keep it standing. Brian wants to take it to the ground. So if it stays standing, I'm giving the clear advantage to Max Holloway. But if it goes to the ground, good luck to the champ. Because I think if Brian Ortega gets a hold of you on the ground, it's game over. And not just for Max Holloway, but for anybody in the featherweight division. What's interesting, though, is if Brian's able to get him to the ground, how is he going to be able to do it? Because neither of these guys are wrestlers, okay? And in order for Brian to get Max down to the ground, he's going to have to close that distance. And that's not a very good idea against Max Holloway. But he knows that, and he's going to have to try and do that. Max Holloway, though, although, again, not a wrestler, he's got an 83, I think it is, percent defensive takedown rate. So it'd be really interesting to see how Brian plans to execute on that game plan of getting Max Holloway onto the ground. Another thing to look at, though, is the mental aspect of fighting, of course. And I guess first let's touch on Max Holloway. He's had a really rough 2018. He's had 3 fights scheduled, and he's had to pull out of all 3 fights due to health reasons. So whether it was the doctors pulling him out or the commission saying, we don't think it's safe, we don't want, for the Khabib fight, we don't think it's safe, we want you to pull out. We know in his last fight against T-City, he had concussion-like symptoms during fight week, and I think blacked out after one of his interviews or after one of his training sessions, blacked out and had to pull out of that fight. So Max Holloway has had a really rough 2018. He's a big guy. He's 5'11", and getting down to 145 is not easy for him. So it'll be really interesting to see how healthy Max is. And in addition to that, he admittedly stated that he went into kind of a depression after all that happened. Max is a fighter, and he wants to be in there fighting. And when you've got 3 fights scheduled and you got to pull out of every single one of them, he admittedly was depressed. And so I've been paying close attention to him, though, in this training camp. And he seems, as always, he seems to be in real high spirits, and he seems to be really healthy. So something to pay attention to. The mental aspect of Max Holloway. Is he out of that depression, and is he going to be healthy going into Saturday night? Brian Ortega, the mental aspect of Brian Ortega is interesting because this is the biggest fight of his career, okay? Main event on a main card, title shot against, as I've said, who I think is the greatest featherweight in the history of the division on a 12-fight win streak. It's going to be really interesting to see how Brian approaches this fight. Now, I think he's going to do a really good job because in all of Brian's fights, he's stayed very calm and collected. Even in some of his dog fights, like the one against Cub Swanson or against Moicano, he was taking punches, hard punches, but he always seemed super relaxed in there. Like nothing gets to this guy. So something to pay attention to. He's fighting on the biggest stage of his career. He's fighting for a belt. Not quite as important as fighting for a belt. He's trying to keep his undefeated record alive. So I think he'll do a real good job with it. Approaching this championship fight. I think Max has learned from his lessons these past few fights. I think he's been taking care of his body, and he really wants this one. So I don't know if there's a real clear advantage there, just something to pay attention to. So let's get to the prediction though. This fight could go either way. Right now, Max is a very slight favorite. He's just minus 125, so it's almost a pick 'em. Very slight edge going to Max out of Vegas. I think Max gets it done. And I think he gets it done by technical knockout. I'm going Max Holloway, TKO, 5th round. Okay, that's it for UFC 231, guys. I really appreciate you tuning in. As I mentioned, this is my first YouTube video. Hopefully the first of many to come. But like I said, I created this channel to open up dialogue with MMA fans. So please comment, let me know your thoughts on the matchups, who you think's gonna win, how are they gonna win, what round, that sort of thing, and why you think that is your prediction. So really look forward to hearing from you all. Please like and subscribe so you get a notification if I'm thinking about doing a recap video to kind of see how we did. And then of course, later this month, on December 29th, we've got UFC 232 with John Jones and Alexander Gustafsson. So definitely going to be making a video for that. So make sure you subscribe so you get that update. And thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next time.